Hello there, everybody, and welcome to the Entertainment Headquarters. And of course, welcome to my segment, My Top 10. Now, this segment is where I do my top 10 list on anything within the world of entertainment, movies, television. We'll pick a subject and we'll pick the top 10 within the category that's been chosen. And right now, it is Steven Spielberg. So that's right. We're going to talk about my top 10 Steven Spielberg films. But along for the ride is my fellow collab master. I like to call him my collab master. Because he and me have done quite a few collabs. I'm a co-host on his channel. He's a co-host on my channel. He's a good friend also, all the way from the Metal Tavern Radio YouTube channel and podcast, Mr. DJ Anubis.
Thank you very much. Honored to be here.
Yeah. So prior to this, I've had a few technical difficulties, but let's hope nothing fucks up this time. And first, before we start with list, I'm just going to ask you one question. What do you think overall of Steven Spielberg as a director?
Very good director. He's very creative. He pays attention to detail, something I've noticed a lot about him. Early on, obviously, maybe not as much, but he was younger. But as time has gone on, you can tell he pays a lot more attention to detail. Some of the movies that I bring up later in my list will showcase a lot of that. One thing you and I were talking about behind the scenes is his ability to go from whether it's animation to fun to serious topics. He's very versatile in his directing and how he brings about the character development and emotions within a film.
Yeah, and he's very, like I say, like we were talking behind the scenes, he's one of them directors where he can go all out and create a fantasy movie, a sci-fi movie that's for everybody, and create lifelong, iconic characters. But then he can go the serious kind of genre route, and create a film that instills a lot of emotion in you because of the subject matter that he talks about. And one thing I noticed when I looked at his filmography, he's made a lot of movies, but he's a massive producer more than a director these days. He seems to be got his hands in every pie.
It's so funny because I was like telling myself before we jumped on, I said, dude, I know he was part of Poltergeist. And so I went back and looked, and it was Toby Hooper that directed it, but Steven had a part in writing it. And I'm like, there you go. There's the connection. So even if he's not directly responsible for directing, he's got, as you said, his hands in the pie. He's in the mix somewhere.
Definitely. So let's get cracking. And we'll start off with your number 10.
So, going back to when I was about an early teen, 13, 14 years old, this movie got released. Didn't know really what to expect from it. Obviously, it's a fun movie. It's a little more kid-friendly at the time, and that is, of course, E.T., the extraterrestrial. A lot of fun with the alien. Actually, animatronic of E.T. was pretty amazing for its time. I'm trying to remember the lead actor, the young kid, because he went on to do like Suicide Kings later down the road. And of course, the young Drew Barrymore was in there. Just a good cast, good acting, a lot of fun, even sad because as a kid, I remember some of us were like bawling our eyes out when we thought he was dead and shit. So, yeah.
Don't forget, we did a review on this channel of Mike Flanagan's The Fall of the House of Usher. And the kid that played Elliot was one of the lead actors in that show. And if anyone's not checked out our review of that, it was with also DJ Neko from the Metal Tavern Radio.
Good series.
Yeah, really good series. And actually, the Mike Flanagan has just been announced to be the director of the sequel to The Exorcist Believer.
Nice.
So I think they
Hopefully it's
brought
better than that. I haven't watched Believer yet, but I've heard bad things
it's
about
been nothing but it's been universally panned, hasn't it? So they've obviously brought on the new master of horror, I guess, to try and save it.
it. There
But
you go.
yes, E.T., I've got a lot of fond memories with that. But my number 10 is Close Encounters with the Third Kind. Now, I remember saying to you behind the scenes that I seen this when I was a lot younger. And I don't think I appreciate the film because I was young and I didn't quite understand it. But as I've
Mm,
gotten older, I've really warmed to it a lot more, especially the cast and the overall story. And the one thing, like everybody else, that stood out for me as a kid was that one moment when you see the mothership behind the mountain rise up. And once again, like I was saying with Steven Spielberg, he's just a master of creating these iconic moments within film. So that is why Encounters with the Third Kind is my number 10.
very nice. Good selection. Number 9 for me is, we talked about it with this movie. Like, again, I won't really watch it that often because it's kind of a gut wrencher. It's very dramatic and traumatic from a war perspective. But Saving Private Ryan, great plot line, great story, um, great acting. Obviously, Tom Hanks is amazing as Matt Damon, of course. But it's so hard to get through because it does touch on a lot of realism and wartime efforts, and the loss of life and stuff like that. Even the ending, where Damon's character is at the cemetery and he just salutes them, like that's a tough moment to get through. But just a very, very good film. But it's not one that I would say that's entertaining, I guess, as they explain. Like, it's good, but it's not really entertaining because it's not like a
Mm,
feel good film, really.
no,
So, yeah.
yeah, but it's like what was said before. You can either create these films with amazing characters that you root for, and they're just iconic, or you just have the ability to sucker you in emotionally, which is what happens with Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
But my number 9 is another war type movie, and this is probably one of his most recent films, I guess. And I loved it. I loved the story behind it. I loved the characters. I loved I just loved it from top to bottom, just because of the authenticity of it, similar to what you were seeing with Saving Private Ryan, and it is Warhorse. So Warhorse for me was a really good film. Not on the level of Saving Private Ryan, but of course, obviously, I still enjoyed it for what it was.
I've never seen that. Is that similar to, just from the cover, is that similar to like Hidalgo?
With the horse, yeah, it's
Yeah.
where he trains the horses and stuff for to go into he's like an Irish hunter, isn't he? That he's and stuff like that. It's really
Okay.
quite. I think you'd enjoy it.
All right. I'll have to check it out when I get a chance.
Mm-hmm.
My number 8. This is actually my favorite of the entire series. However, it's hard for me to put it as high as another one in the series
Mm.
because there's like just a natural reaction to the original. But this one I have a lot of fun with because I love fucking Jeff Goldblum a lot, and that is The Lost World, Jurassic Park. And just a fun movie. Goldberg, he just steals the entire film. Like, he's really, really good at this. I know a lot of people come away with this one not liking it as much, but I don't know. I just have so much fun with this. It's, even though I've seen a lot of the other ones and they're all right, this one I always come back to and I watch a lot.
Yeah,
I enjoy the shit out of it.
yeah, I like this one, but I think the first one still trumps the second one. But it has a different feel to it, but it's
Yeah,
still epic
yeah.
at all the same at the same time. Going to my number 8, you've already mentioned it. It is ET. For me
Oh,
personally, Phone Horn, I just love the story, the concept of it. And even though I had seen it a few times when I was younger, I do know a few years later he re-released it, and I think he altered it with modernized CG, which I think he added some extra clips that were like new CG, or he went over similar to what George Lucas did with the Star Wars films,
Hmm.
where he kind of altered it with modernized CG for its time, and that is when I had noticed ET even more. Like I say, similar with Counters of the Third Kind, is when he had re-released it, and I actually went to see it when they re-released it in theaters. And
Nice.
once again, it gave me like another appreciation for ET. Like you say, the cast are phenomenal, the story's phenomenal. And I even mentioned, speaking of Star Wars, how there is that scene in the Senate where you have the little pods that are holding the different alien races that are talking, and then suddenly you see in the corner this little pod with these little like aliens that are wobbling side to side listening to the Senate, and it's actually the ET race. So technically ET
Hmm.
could be seen as a prequel or a crossover with the Star Wars
See,
franchise.
I've never caught that, so now I got my curiosity. I have to go back and actually look for it because that's kind of
Yeah.
a cool little connection there.
Yeah. And like you say, like I mentioned before, it's from a galaxy far, far away. So probably ET and his family left that world and that galaxy to start a
Yep.
new life.
Right. Let's see. My number 7. This one, early on, not many people knew about it. I think within the last decade or so, it started to catch a little fire because more people talk about it. But this was
Mm-hmm.
actually a TV movie called Duel. And I believe the main actor who's driving the car is the same dude that appears in Tremors. I can't remember for sure, but basically, you have a guy that's just going about driving through the country. He's on a business trip. Ends up getting into what we call road rage with a trucker who's driving a rig, and it becomes like a battle on screen for them to one up each other in terms of like he's trying to pass the trucker, a trucker's being an asshole, and then the trucker's harassing him the rest of this trip, and it's really crazy. It's a great movie and very underrated, and most people are starting to catch on to it. It shows you just how good Spielberg is in story writing and tension and build up, and of course for a TV movie it did exactly that, especially for the 70s. So yeah, it's a really well filmed. It's one of his earliest films that he worked on, but certainly fucking amazing. I just love it.
What was the name of the film?
It's called Duel, Duel.
Duel.
Yeah,
I've never.
fantastic film. Highly recommended.
Uh, mm, Duel. I've never ever actually heard of that film at all.
Oh,
Duel.
yep.
Duel.
Just like I gotta check out Warhouse, you gotta check out
Yeah,
this
I've
film.
never actually heard it. Well, look, I'm just looking at his filmography here, and it was actually the second film Steven Spielberg directed. It came out in 1971.
Yeah, you see, when you think about the premise, it's like, wow, is this really an interesting movie? But when I watched it when I was younger, I was like, this is incredible. And like at the time, I don't think I even know it was Spielberg until later on. So I was like, this is just an incredible fucking movie. It's great.
Uh, it's got me. It's got me ears buzzing. This potentially could be a future cinematic synergy.
That or even one of your retro classics because it would fit in that category.
Yeah, very true, very true. Yes, you've got my eyes are widened, and it's got me very, very intrigued. Just the way you've described the story and everything, and the fact that Steven Spielberg, and it's a Steven Spielberg film I've not
And
seen.
keep in mind, like the guide and the trucker, you never see him. Like you see maybe like him in the mirror of the truck a little bit, but you don't ever see the guy at all through the film. So
Let's
it's like
see if
this
I
big
can.
mysterious black rig, and it's like cat and mouse between this guy in his car and the truck.
Well, I'm gonna have to track this down and see if I can find it to watch it. I'm very
Yeah,
intrigued.
you
But
will love it.
so that is your number 7.
Hmm.
My number 7 is a well-known film. I think it's one of his most popular films, and they actually did this. I don't know if there's been talk recently of a remake, but I know they did a television series that didn't do as well, and it is, of course, Minority Report with Tom Cruise. I think this is one of his best films. And I'm not a big fan of Tom Cruise. There's only probably 4 or 5 of his films that I do enjoy, and this is one of them. And I do like the other film that him and Steven Spielberg collabed on, which was the remake of War of the Worlds. I thought it was a fairly decent, modernized version of War of the Worlds.
Yeah,
But
the only problem with War of the Worlds for me was Fanning. Like, she was younger, but the it's this thing with the whining kid. Like, she's just whining too much. So I'm like, shut her the fuck up, please.
yeah, I was gonna say she for me is the weakest point of the movie. It's just her. And actually, if I'm going back, I think the son's worse.
Maybe I haven't seen it in quite a long time, but you're probably right.
Especially when he's actually wanting to go towards the fucking alien tripods, and he's going to be like, just let us go. Let us go, Dad. It's like a fly going into the fucking light to be massacred. It just, for me, that point of the plot, I just had no idea why. And then somehow, sorry if you haven't seen it, but it's been out for years. Somehow, right at the end of the movie, when they get to the destination, the son miraculously survives. But then 10 minutes before, when he gets over the hill, there's that big fucking fireball. And it's like, how did he survive the fireball? But anyway, that's just me bitching about War of the Worlds.
Yeah, the only thing about Minority Report, I do remember watching it. I think at the time I didn't really care for it, but I have to kind of go back and revisit it, because one thing that I do know about the film is that it's playing off mind crimes. Like, it's all about arresting people for crimes before they happen. So when we think about some of our society today, and like people trying to condemn you for, even if you're just a bad thing, like even if you're not physically hurting somebody or going out of your way, if you have a thought and you put it on social media, people automatically villainize you. And so going back to that film, it's kind of like predating a lot of the crap that we're seeing today, even though no one's getting arrested for thoughts. But it is an interesting concept. Again, Spielberg being creative there.
I think that's why I generally like this, is because of the concept behind it. Yeah. I think it's a unique concept, and like you say, it fits perfectly in with today's modern culture and society.
Yep. My number 6, we talked about it with my number 8, but the reason why this one's here, because it was the OG, and at the time it was such a spectacle to go into the theater because it hadn't really been done like this, and that's Jurassic Park. And it was just such a fun fucking movie. Great concept, dinosaurs, bringing it back. Like, the idea behind it was really fun. Even now, when we think about cloning, it kind of plays a part, some of this stuff, and it's very, very interesting. Never really dreamed that it was going to go into this huge long series, but it's still being enjoyed a lot by people. Even if it's some of the later stuff's not quite measuring up, but it's still a lot of fun because we all love dinosaurs. If we're kaiju fans, we love monsters, and so dinosaurs kind of fit into that category.
Yeah, and I remember years ago, Terminator 2, and that came out, I think, the year before, 1992. Is that right? This came out in 1993.
Yeah, Terminator 2 was 92, and then I think Jurassic Park was 93, somewhere in there.
So I remember the year that T2 came out, there was all this buzz about James Cameron, because he had done, he'd done Aliens. He kind of changed the landscape for science fiction. With Aliens. It was like alien action. He changed it. Then he did it again with Terminator 2. But when Jurassic Park came out, he like totally changed the direction for special effects. Even though James Cameron did, and I always think it's like a friendly competition between him and Cameron. But I think
one up each other. Yeah.
But I think Steven Spielberg's give up now. He's just doing his thing, and he's not like his legacy for me is going to outlive the legacy of James Cameron.
Easily, because Cameron kind of like, he'll put together a good film, but it's always so spread out. Like, he really has to like find enough time to get those ideas to come to him. Spielberg can jump out of any kind of genre, and he can make some very
Yeah.
good films out of nothing.
He's a better cook in the kitchen, put it that way, when it
Right.
comes to films. Where Cameron, he's like has like everyone, I think the majority of people I know, including yourself, prefer his earlier work than his modern work. Where Steven
Yes.
Spielberg always seems to bring with something that surprises me. But like I say, and I always remember going back to what you said with Jurassic Park. There was no real promotion leading up to Jurassic. They just knew the title of the film. They knew it was based on a book. I don't think there was many trailers out. I think there was the one thing I miss is when they talk about teaser trailers back in the day, it literally would be a teaser. I think I remember seeing something in theaters and all you had was the fluttering of water, like a black screen,
Yeah.
and the little bit of the theme of Jurassic Park.
Yeah. If I recall, I mean, it's been so long, but you had the water and the footprint, and then
Yeah,
like
and
you
then
may
the
have
then
saw
the
the bottom jaw of the T-Rex at the end. Maybe that's all they gave you. But
yeah
I remember like they were promoting it, but it was more like through merchandise. So you would get
yeah
like watches or soda cans like
yeah
they did for GXK. Like you
yeah,
got
but they
those little
wouldn't
trinkets
actually
on the
show
theater.
you any footage of the
Right,
actual
right.
film.
Yep.
And that's what I miss about modern cinema. Like, I think the closest we've had for us personally is kaiju fans, is when they were promoting Godzilla 2014. The
Hmm.
two trailers didn't show any footage of Godzilla. Or you had like maybe the odd bit when you saw the monorail and you seen the Muto arm crush through it, but there
Yeah.
was no real like footage of Godzilla himself.
There was at the very end in the dust, but that's funny. That scene doesn't really appear in the film, if I recall. But I remember
No.
seeing the image and then hearing the roar. Like I knew they were going in the right direction with
Mm,
2014.
yeah,
But at that time, they didn't show the Mutos. Like you
yeah,
thought Godzilla was the
no.
villain, so it's like,
Mhm. But well, I kind of knew there was something else in the film because when the first trailer dropped, you did see the Mutual Claw go through the monorail. You could just for a split second, a bit like how with JVK, you knew there's that scene where the people are running under the building. You see something for a one split second fly across the building, and you knew it was something else other than Kong Godzilla. When it came to J14, that's what you said with the dust. That was actually a teaser that was showed exclusively at Comic Con,
yeah.
and it was after the film was released. They released it online.
Oh, I
So
didn't. That was the first I'd seen anything of it.
yeah,
Like
so I
someone just
don't.
put it up there, and it was before I was doing YouTube stuff. So I was like so
Yeah,
psyched. So we were at your number 6, I think.
so my number 6 is my favorite of this series. It's my absolute all-time favorite of this film series. Unfortunately, the film series has kind of been ended on a very sad note. I wish they had just left well alone. But no, they decided to take one more crack at it, which I think has had bad reviews and has left kind of a bad taste in people's mouth. And I'm talking about Indiana Jones. So Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom out of the whole series is my all-time favorite because I just love the story. I love the cat, and I love Short Round. I just think he's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, great cast, a lot of fun. Which is funny because my number 5 is, of course, Temple of Doom. I remember at the time it got released, there was so much controversy about it because of the gore and stuff like that, and whether or not it was right for kids to see. Because they'd come off Raiders, which is a little bit more fun and not really violent per se, but
Mm,
Indiana was pushing that envelope at the time, and in hindsight, I don't think it was even that bad. But at the early '80s, they were trying to navigate this space with how much kids could see and whether it
mm,
should be
mm,
NC-17 or rated R.
mm.
But yeah, Indiana Jones and Temple Doom was great. Great concept. Short round. No more parachutes. That's like my favorite line from that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's so fun. Like one of the creepiest points, of course, is when the young lady that's in the film with them, the love interest, I think, she's walking through to try to unlock a trap, and she's walking through all those insects and
Mm-hmm.
stepping on them.
Yeah. And fun fact for those that don't know, she later became Steven Spielberg's wife.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
Did not
they
know
are
that.
married. Yes, I
Oh, cool.
don't know. I think they're still married. They're still actually married today. I don't know if this is where they met or if they had been dating and then because of this, she ended up then
A lot of
dating
times
him.
it's usually when they end up working together, it's kind of
Yeah.
like how it works. Like I just learned, like I know it's off topic a little bit. I watched a doc on the movie I Spit on Your Grave, which is like an old 70s like schlock flick. But the girl that actually starred in the film, who was being tormented and raped by men,
Mm,
she actually ended up marrying the director, which I thought was kind of interesting and cool. They're really well, they divorced more recently, but they were married for quite a long time. But
mm,
yeah, a lot of times you just they find these partnerships and love interests when they ever work together on films and stuff. So
So, well, the actress is called Kate Capshaw, and
okay,
she was an active actress from 1981 to 2001, and she's been married to Steven Spielberg since 1991, and she has 6 children.
wow,
So she was married previous to somebody called Robert Capshaw. I don't know if he's an actor or what, but they got divorced in 1980, and then she's been with Steven Spielberg ever since 1991. And
she leveled up.
yeah, this also kind of reminds me of James Cameron and who plays Sarah Connor, Linda
Linda
Hamilton.
Hamilton, yeah,
Yeah, they were together for a long, long time and then separated. But I think they're on good terms. I think they're still friendly
oh
with
yeah,
one another.
yeah.
But anyway, we're going off topic. This isn't Dr. Phil. Uh, but we're on to my number 5, I believe, are we not?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yep,
So my
yep.
number 5 is a film that you really enjoy. I really enjoyed and I wanted to put it higher, but it's like you said, it's hard to pick out of these films. It's not hard picking films, it's picking the roles that they're going.
Yeah.
And so I had to go with Ready Player
Ready Player
One
One.
because I do know this is probably out of all of I would say his recent films, this is probably the highest on my list.
Yeah.
Warhorse, like I say, I've mentioned that one, but this one is just on another level. And I do know the author's done the book Ready Player 2, and I know that they're in talks now to bring it to the screen, but I don't know if Steven Spielberg's a part of it. I would like to think he will be because he's done such an epic job with Ready Player One. And the great concept with, for me personally, Ready Player One, what I loved about it the most is not since I would say Roger Rabbit is where you had so many different characters from so many different, companies, franchises, uh, all on one
The
screen. And
fact he was able to get copyrights for all that is great. Like
mm,
that's a lot of work. Yeah,
well,
because you had
yeah, I think though if Steven Spielberg comes knocking at your door and he's going to make you money off a franchise that you own or he's
yeah,
going to promote, you're not going to say no to that.
exactly. All
So
right. So what are
you're
we on
number
my number
4.
4?
You're number 4.
Yeah. So my number 4, the 70s were the biggest time for me, really, when it came to Spielberg, outside of course, later down the road. But when it came to drive-ins, I was always at the drive-in with my babysitter or with my mother at the time. So in 77, this film came out. As a kid, I was about 7. So like some of it was scary, some of it was interesting, and some of it was very sweet. You've already mentioned it. It's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The film was just fucking amazing. Again, who's the actor? Dreyfus was
Richard
amazing in this.
Dreyfuss,
Yeah.
who's another collaborator of Steven Spielberg.
Yep. So Dreyfus was amazing. You thought he was crazy at times, and then the big moment in that is when he's trying to build a replica of the ship through mud and sand and everything on his little big table, and he rips it off because he's getting angry, and it ends up looking at it and then looking at the TV and seeing the Devil's Tower in Wyoming. which does exist in real life. He sees the Devil's Tower and he's like, something's connecting here because he's
Mm-hmm.
obviously run into UFOs and aliens, and he's obsessed about it now. So you mentioned it about towards the end, the mothership's coming there because everyone's trying to communicate. They have this government facility with behind the mountain, and they're using do to try to communicate with these alien ships, and they eventually do. And it's kind of fun, but as a kid, you're kind of like just terrified, like because aliens
Mm.
were supposed to be scary, and all this stuff. So, four, that one holds a close place to my heart there
Mm.
with that film.
Yeah, definitely. Well, just like that's got, a special bond with you and for you, the one you've already mentioned also has the same effect on me, and it's
Jurassic.
Jurassic Park. Now, I've got a story that I'm going to take to the grave with me, because me and my dad and my brother will hardly go to the theatre together. I'll go a lot with my brother, but my dad's not really one for big crowds or going to theatres, like into the cinemas. But I will never forget my first time seeing that film, and it was on a bright summer's day. And we had something in Newcastle called the Tall Ship Festival. It comes around once in a while, and it's like the giant traditional, like, rowing boats and with the sails and the masses. And it was an absolute boiling hot day. It was absolutely manic busy. My dad was getting irritated because it was ridiculously busy. We walked up to the city centre, and my mum wanted to go shopping. And my dad was like, I'm not taking the kids around shopping in this heat and in these crowds. So my mum said, well, why don't you, while I go and spend a couple of hours in the stores, why don't you take the kids to the theatre? And we got to the old Odeon, which was a very big classic theatre. It had all the bells and whistles for its time, like an old school theatre. And there was a queue around the block, like right around the block. And honestly, it went right
Wow.
around the block, down the street near the massive bus station that we had, which
Shit.
was, there must have been about 150 people queuing at the theatre on this boiling hot day. So my mum was like, what do you want to see? And I can't remember what other kids' film was out at the time, but me and my brother said Jurassic Park. And we never actually thought we would get tickets, but the theatre had about 8 screens, and 6 of the 8 screens were showing Jurassic Park. Just to get,
Wow.
they took all films off. They had, like, them big boards
Yeah.
where you used to
Yeah.
like put all the things. They had all the names of the films up on this big board, but they just couldn't show them films because of the demand for Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
And I remember the one scene that will always stick with me, and it's the scene when you see the T-Rex first come out of the enclosure, and the roar for the very first time, and I've never ever forgot that. And I remember when me and me and Sci-Fi Century, sorry, did our one-to-one on his channel when we did a review of Godzilla 1954. And I said to him, there's only been 3 or 4 times in my life where I've had this feeling while watching a film. One was seeing 1954 for the first time as a kid. The second time was seeing Jurassic Park.
Yep. Yeah, that's kind of amazing because it's not often you get those long queue lines. Like I know I saw, even though I never saw it in the theaters or anything, when The Exorcist came out, there was similar lines just running out the door. I think they did that. I think it was for Star Wars. I mean, obviously I saw that at the drive-in, but there were moments in the 80s when you'd have movies and they were still had lines. Like it's
Mm,
pretty incredible. So I think that's why you saw a lot of movie theaters kind of moving to bigger locations and
mhm,
expanding their theaters because the demand was so high.
In
So now
modern
it's kind of like,
times,
yeah, because now it's kind of scary because people aren't really going out as much. So you have all
mhm,
these big ass theaters with no one really filling them up. So it's
yeah,
kind of tough.
Yeah, and the last time I had seen like that kind of pandemonium for a film, even though there's been loads of great films, that's the one that always stands out. The only other time where I would say it got close to that in modern times is when Avengers Endgame came out. I
Mm.
remember going to the Odeon, which moved over to another location, and they knocked that old traditional building down and they made this new high tech theatre. Um, it was much bigger, much more spacious, so you couldn't really tell about the queues. But that had about 4 or 5 screenings, but you still had mini queues lining up to go into each theatre, and that's the last I've ever seen it that crazy.
Yep. All right. Well, my number three, in the series, the third one's okay. The second one's great, but there's nothing like the OG. And at my number three, it's Raiders of the Lost Ark. Fun movie, brought Indiana Jones and Harrison Ford to the forefront, even though he was already doing good things with Star Wars. But this movie was great. He has a good way of making the character fun and hilarious, and even the concept behind Raiders is amazing. Like it has its own scary moments towards the end of the film, with the when you release God or whatever out of the fucking ark, and you've got like melted faces and shit. So like that movie is just amazing, and it's always been up high on my list. I didn't know if it was initially going to finish here, but after I was breaking down my list, I was like, "There's no way I can keep it lower. Like it's just that good."
Mm, well, the first one, like I say, it was probably meant to be a one and done,
Yeah,
like most things. And then because of its popularity and how popular the character Indiana Jones was, and probably Lucasfilm saw, just like with Star Wars, I had that opportunity to change it into a franchise. They went ahead and did that. But they should have stopped at 3, because I think 3 was always intended to be the last one. And if there's any lesson that needs to be learned, is if you look at this and then you look at Back to the Future, they've only have ever done the 3 of them. And I know Robert Zazinski, I think he's called, that does them. He's vowed until he dies, there'll never be another Back to the Future,
yeah,
because he owns the right to them, and until somebody in his family sells the rights, there'll never be another Back to the Future. And I think he is obviously seen through time. If something doesn't meet your expectations, you'd rather them not leave something alone than let the fans down. And I think
right.
that's what they should have done with Indiana Jones.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely.
Crystal Skulls. See, I think Crystal Skulls will go down the same way as the prequel trilogy with the Star Wars, because the sequel trilogy is so controversial and is always hit and miss with the fans nowadays. People now look and appreciate the prequel trilogy.
Right.
Now, I think because of the reaction of the Dial of Destiny, people are now looking at Crystal Skulls and go, "That's not quite a bad film. It's quite a."
Right.
I actually like Crystal Skulls. It's not on the level of the originals, but I didn't think it was as terrible and as bad as some people have made it out to be. I think there is some shining moments in that film.
I think if you just took LaBouffe out of it, it'd be fine. Like I just, I know that they've been dabbling. It's not like Harrison Ford's fault or anything, but they dabble with. I think they were trying to pass the torch. I think they were really trying to like expand on Indiana Jones, and by giving it maybe to his son, or I think that's what
Yeah,
LaBouffe was supposed to be.
he was.
It was
Yeah,
sort of like this passing a torch. Of course, now I think the Dial of Destiny. I didn't watch it, but is it a daughter or just a
it's no,
girl taking over?
it's not his daughter. It's his goddaughter. So
Okay,
somebody who, when he was in Germany and he stole something from the Germans, he had to get a companion, and his companion is obviously years down the line. His companion, who he had during that time, passed away, but he had a daughter, and obviously Indiana Jones is her godfather.
got it.
So
Okay,
they've tried to do the same thing without the Shia LaBeouf character and spin it off again, but it just doesn't work, because I don't know if it's the idea of the character or the actors that are playing the character. They just don't bring the chemistry that matches with Harrison Ford.
right,
And
and that's part of the
also,
problem we talk about all the time is okay, you want to make a strong female character, great, but let's make a good story that works with everybody. Like, you
Mhm.
don't, if there's one gripe that I've always had about Fury Road with Mad Max is the movie is a 10 out of 10. It's an amazing movie, but
But
it's not a Mad Max film. It's a
nope.
Furiosa film. So, and
Mhm.
that's fine. But we could have did, if you're going to put Max in there, make sure he's an integral part of it, not just
Mhm.
there for
He's more like
whatever.
a, yeah, like the way I'm looking at this new Ferocia film coming, that's like the prequel to the one before. It's
Right.
basically her story.
Right. And that's great.
So, but
I'm interested. I like it. It looks
mhm.
good. I love
And
Anya.
the one other point I'll make about the last Indiana Jones film before we move on is I think she was a stronger character, but she just didn't fit because of how they portrayed Indiana Jones in this film. He went from
Right.
being this badass character who, then became this really shell of himself, a shell of a man of who he was before, and like this whining OAP.
And that's it's such a great example you're giving there because I think about. Did you ever see El Camino?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What they
So
did is that
Eastwood's
the
character is
yeah.
very hard, and he's very racist and very yah. But you see his transformation from this guy that really hated the world and was angry about his wife's death and how his family treats him.
Mm-hmm.
But he becomes to learn that not everybody is bad, and he kind of changes himself, and he ends up becoming the hero in the end. But it's not done in a way that weakens his character at all. He's still him. He just
Mm-hmm.
kind of grew. And I think the biggest complaint that I hear about Destiny is that Ford's character is not growing. He's just becoming a pussy in some weird way.
He's basically just becoming a windy old man.
Right.
Like, obviously, even if you think about it, is it really realistic for a person to have went through all that trauma, who's got this tough, you know, hysteria, to
Yeah,
then turn into this pussy shell of himself? There is
exactly.
the only thing that I could say that might have done it because he had some trauma and he was grieving. Like, I don't know if you want us to spoil it for you or not, a little bit of
I
this.
don't care. I mean, I may catch it eventually, but if you want to spoil
So,
it, it doesn't going to hurt me any.
so how I looked at it, he was grieving and he wasn't his normal self, because at the beginning of the film you find out Mutt, who was played by Shia LaBeouf, is killed.
Okay.
So he's killed off screen. He gets killed going to war. And so he's lost his son, and also his marriage is broke down. He was married the mother, that Karen character, who was
Yeah.
in the last one and in the first one. So they've now separated. Mutt's now died, and so I don't know if they were trying to make it come across he had lost a part of himself because his life had fell apart in some way, but it just doesn't come across that way. It just comes across he comes across as a whiny old man, and he's not like the badass that we're used to. And even I would just imagine an older Indiana Jones, even at that age, would still be somewhat of a badass.
Yeah, I think you
And
can show a character who is vulnerable but not weak. And so
mhm,
it's all about the storytelling and the writing of the
mhm,
characters. That's what failed them in that film, I think.
definitely. So we're moving
Yeah.
on to my number three.
Yep.
And you've mentioned this before, and I like Steven Spielberg when he does the fun stuff, the sci-fi stuff, the action stuff, things with the iconic characters pull you in. But I am a big fan of when he does all serious. And there's one film I'm dying to see which I haven't seen yet, which I'll talk about at the end. But this is a film that just gripped at me for all the reasons you mentioned, and it is Saving Private Ryan. I love this because of how gritty and realistic, and how tough it is. The
Attention to
grittiness of
detail.
it's that you need. It sounds weird. We'll watch films for escapism. We'll watch films to leave the mundane life behind, or the stresses of work, and we like to go into a fantasy world and escape. But sometimes we need films to educate with. We need films to show with the real, tough times in life and history.
Mhm.
And this is one of those films that delivered that 100%. It
Definitely.
delivered the realities of war, and
Yep.
sometimes, as much as we don't want, that realisticness, but sometimes we need to face it, because we're not going to grow, we're not going to learn. And basically, if you look at the day's society of younglings, what I call the pussy generation, because that's what they're going to be if they're just, if their lives all on fucking TikTok and Zoom and fucking God
Yep.
knows what.
Yep.
Um, but if they want to educate themselves on what going to war was like, watch Saving Private Ryan.
Yep. Yeah. Even if you take the story of itself, because it's kind of a weird story, but it would make sense in that era. But just how they interact, and like one of the most gut wrenching scenes in that film is the guy that's on the staircase, and he has a chance to save his buddy from being impaled by a knife, a hunting knife, by a German. Doesn't do anything. Then the German comes out. This guy on the staircase pissed himself just being there.
Mm-hmm.
Now later on, he gets his revenge in a sense, but it's kind of like, man, you could have saved your friend, but you have to understand the fear that is in your head, uh, trying to, um, in wartime. So you get this. That's why PTSD exists now. We don't really address it as much, and so just a realism of wartime effort and what's happening while you're there. Like it's hard, man, and it's very difficult. So yeah, I was just saying that it's
Yeah.
hard to understand war when you haven't really lived it. So we might say to ourselves, man, he should have helped his buddy, but not everybody's built the same way. And so it comes off like you have to understand this is how PTSD came about, because a lot of the memories and the things that you thought you could have done, because even if I think that guy ends up dying down the road, but
Mm.
if he had lived, those are the things he would have to live with, that he couldn't save his buddy when he should have. Like, but it's fear grips you. So that's the masterclass writing that Spielberg has when he directs a film. And that kind of ties into my number two. One that you've already mentioned, I can watch this anytime, anywhere, any place, and I will sit down and watch it. You and I discussed this film and your top 10 best sci-fi films of the last 10 or 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's Ready Player One. It's a blast, a lot of nostalgia. It's just so fun movie, and that's the thing I like about movies that are very rewatchable. Like I can watch any of these movies at any time, but there are movies that are just so fun that I don't have to worry about anything super serious. Like it's like popcorn flick straight up. Ready Player One does that. It just I can watch it anytime and just not be stressed about it. It's just fun.
Mm.
And so it is kind of interesting that one of his more later films is this high on my list, but that I just fell in love with this film right away.
Yeah, it's like, it could be classed as the new Roger Rabbit for a new generation, the new ET for a new generation.
Yep. And unfortunately, he froze up again. We're trying to get down to the end. But yeah, the nostalgia fact, we got a little bit of Mecha Godzilla in there. There's one dude, I can't remember his name. He kind of plays like the villain's henchman in the gaming world. And so when there's a point where everyone loses all their shit because everyone gets wiped out by this massive bomb that's built into the game itself to kind of like destroy all the characters. It's like the villain's go-to try to solve what's going on with uh, the hero trying to save the day.
Mm-hmm.
And so what ends up happening is this guy loses all his shit and he's trying to collect all his gold. And it's just a funny moment. He's one of my favorite characters. Now, when I talk about my gaming stuff, there's a guy that says he wants to restart this particular game and go back to the beginning. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not losing my shit that I've earned for 10 years or longer in this game. I'm not doing that. But yeah, that's my number two. So obviously,
Mm.
we'll move to your number two.
Yeah, and just before we move on, I've just read there that Steven Spielberg is still developing Ready Player Two. That was the last thing apparently he was looking into it at some time this year. It says, yeah, on December 2020, on December the 22nd, 2020, Klein announced that a sequel was in the early stages of development. Spielberg confirmed that the film was still in development as of March 2024.
Okay.
So he's still looking into it, but he must have a lot on. But we're on to my number 2, and this was a tough one between 1 and 2. It really, really was. But at number 2, it is the classic Jaws.
Oh,
This is just a one of a kind. This put fear in everybody to go in the water. The cast alone were fantastic. My favourite scene actually in this is not actually got anything to do with the shark, but the scene near the end of the movie where they're on the boat and he's talking about the story about in the war with the sharks. Because that's an event that really actually transpired, because I looked it up. But it's just the dialogue, it's the overall story, and it's the sheer dread that it put into you.
Yeah, that was all ad libbed. That whole scene by Quint was all ad libbed. Robert Shaw did a great job of selling that point. Funny enough, Shaw, from what I remember from the stuff that I've researched and reviewed, was drunk a lot on the set, and so he and Dreyfuss at times butted heads in real life. But like it worked. It still worked on that scene. As hard as that film was for Spielberg to make, it worked. Like it just worked out for the better.
Yeah, and I've come up with an idea for the next my top 10. My top 10 most iconic deaths.
Oh, okay.
Movie deaths. Because
I really think about that one.
Yeah, because like you said, Quinn does that amazing ad lib story, and then the next thing you know, his death in the film alone. If that didn't make you shit yourself from going into the water,
just the anticipation, because you knew it was coming. But.
And I think for its time, and I don't think you get many films today that are willing to do this, where you see kids getting killed in a movie.
Yeah.
So you don't obviously see the deaths, but you know what's going on. And, there's not many films these days that are willing to take the risk to show like a child death on screen.
And there's actually a deleted scene of young Alex's death that was never shown. It's in black and white. You can find it on YouTube. It's disturbing, but I know why they chose not to go that route, because one, obviously it would have been really, really shocking. The MPAA probably would have really come down on them for it because of the kid. But the other thing is, like, I guess they found out through test screenings that it was really working, that no one saw the shark till the end, like this whole mysterious part about it. One of the best scenes we get actually is early on when the guy's in that little boat and the young Brody kid is out there with his friends, and the boat gets capsized, and then you see the shark just barely out of the water coming to get that guy and take his leg off. So that just within itself is creepy as hell. But that obviously leads me into number 1, because I thought for sure you and I were going to be on the same page over number 1, but not. So I'm curious about your number 1 now, because my number 1, of course, is Jaws. Saw it in the drive-in when I was 5. I told my babysitter I wouldn't have nightmares. I begged her to take me to this film. It's another one of those films that had queues outside the theaters. Drive-ins were packed. The first blockbuster ever, one of the biggest ones. Spielberg probably was thankful that all the bullshit he had to put up with all the technicalities of directing the film and trying to get it done, and it paid off huge. It really made him a star as a director, and it was a great film, and people just kept going back and watching this film. And I did have a nightmare that night, but to this day, it's like Lady Fatblood would say, it's one of my favorite films ever. It's still up in my top 10.
Well, my number 1 is the film that has given me nightmares, and actually I always get emotional when I watch it, and I always get a shiver up my spine, because it's very similar to Saving Private Ryan, but this film is so iconic because of the subject matter, and it gave me obviously I didn't. I had a kind of educated hear the stories at school, but I think it's hard to understand until you see it on screen. And when Steven Spielberg brought this to theatres, I didn't see it in theatres. I seen it in a dark room at a friend's house. It was me and his parents watched this, and when there's certain scenes in this film, you couldn't hear a pin drop. The lights were out, we had popcorn, we had drinks, and honestly, it was one of the most. It's probably been one of the most disturbing films I've ever seen. But that's why it's my number one, because it's left such a profound impact on us, and it is, of course, Schindler's List. Just black and white. The only colour scene is the girl in the red coat. Stuff like that. It just, there's nothing beats it. It's, for me, if I could make two lists for Steven Spielberg, I would. I would make the serious list and the enjoyment list. Because, like I say, you've just had another film that won an Oscar this year, Oppenheimer, which isn't on the same list, but it's the subject matter.
And we should do a Christopher Nolan top 10.
Definitely. But that is why it's number one. It's because of the subject matter and the realism of it. And like I say, one thing I absolutely adore about Steven Spielberg is because he can go from being very fun, energetic, and put out these epic adventures, but then he can go the serious, dramatic route. And
you want to know a crazy thing? I have never watched Schindler's List. I know exactly what it's about. I know it's sad. I just refuse to watch it because I don't really like depressing movies.
Well,
but I understand like why it's so revered, because it won a lot of like attention and Oscars and things. So
basically, this is the film that basically put a lot of spotlight on the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And that is what I had, when you're at school, you're reading about things, but they don't really go into the dark, gritty detail because you're a school kid, but you've got to know your history, so, of the world. This is the film if you want to know how dark it got, which, like you say, if you don't like these kind of films, you probably won't enjoy it. But it's on the same level as Saving Private Ryan in terms of the realisticness in the story and the subject matter. And like I say, this generation haven't got a fucking clue of how things like this paved the way for us to have the lives we have now. And, mistakes and horrible events do transpire every day, but there's certain events that happen that shape the world. And we've got to be grateful for the things we have, like 9/11s. That's probably the biggest impactful thing of when I was younger. That's something I, seen happen on TV. I wasn't there for the Holocaust, but I have great sympathy for the events that transpired. And the same with Private Ryan. It's the full effect of what real war is like.
Yeah.
So
definitely
ending this on a fucking sad note. I'm so sorry about that. But going back to another fun films, do you have any honorable mentions?
I actually do not. Actually, I mean, I'm sure there are films in there that I've seen that I'm okay with, but it wasn't hard putting this list together. It was just a matter of the organization and where they fell. But the ones I have are definitely the best ones that I like out of his. But definitely got to check out Duel.
Definitely,
that is such a great film. I'm anxious to hear what you think of that. Actually,
I really, like I see my eyes lit up just with the way you're talking about it. I've got one honorable mention, so I'll end it, is AI.
AI?
AI, yes. Artificial intelligence.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I've seen that twice. I find it a fascinating story. And obviously right now we're in the era of AIs being talked about. We've already had like the creator. That's all about artificial intelligence. There's loads of talk about that right now. How advanced are we going to go? Where are we going to take it? Should we do it? Should we not do it? They probably will fucking do it because the humans just love to fuck themselves up.
Self-destruct.
Yeah, self-destruct. Yes, we like to fuck ourselves up in a big way. But Anyway, this has been my top 10 Steven Spielberg films. It's been a blast once again to have DJ Anubis on. If you've got any suggestions for my top 10s Anubis, we can have a look at that. Would you like to tell anybody what's coming up on your channel next?
Yeah, so we're going to be doing a classic reflections. I may actually move that to next Friday. I'm not sure. Just depends how I feel, unless I want to do it later tonight. But we're breaking down Static X's Wisconsin Death Trip album, a little bit of the theory and lyrics behind that, as well as the music and how we feel about it. I have some trailers I want to do. I don't know if I'm just going to hold on to them. I might try to do another thing where maybe I'll get Tony and Mr. Kevin here at some point and just do like a collection of trailer reactions together and see how we feel about it. Maybe I'll collect some more. I have like 6 I want to do. I know one of them is In Her Likeness. Another one's called Trap. I think that's a Shyamalan flick. I have, there's just some stuff.
Oh, yeah, Trap, yeah.
So, yeah, I got some things that I want to try to do, but maybe I'll get Neko involved as well. But either way, I got a lot of stuff concert-wise coming up in the next couple of weeks, so you may not see a whole lot of me doing that. But, yeah, so I'll keep you all updated when I have something to do.
Yeah, as for me in the entertainment headquarters, just like Anubis has, a busy month ahead with his work schedule as well as his concert going. I'm gonna be busy the next week or so. The next content that'll probably come to the channel will be on the 17th of May, which will be the review that me and Anubis are looking very forward to, which is Shogun. And we will be joined by Thrash Pondu Pons, another retro YouTuber. And we're going to get them scheduled in the future, but we'll have the next retro classic movie show, which is Neko's Pick, which is Tremors, so she'll be joining us for that one. And one more thing, I'm going to go away for a few days to Romania. And going to Romania, I started the channel in October. I dedicated it to Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Francis Ford Coppola movie, and I did a Whitby blog and I did the Whitby Dracula experience. So I'm going to come full circle and I'm going to go to Romania and visit the castle that inspired Mr. Bram Stoker to make the novel Dracula. So that's just a little bit coming to the entertainment headquarters. But from me and from my good friend here, my fellow co-host, Mr. DJ Anubis, will catch us all at the next one.